bidding folks now.
Hello, everyone. We will get started in about a minute. Please be patient with us as we allow folks into the room. Okay, we'll get started. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see a good number of you joining us for this, our second dialogue in the Public Art and Community Dialogue program focused on the LGBTQIA plus communities. This dialogue holds the same topic as our last dialogue, queer joy and thriving. And this dialogue will focus on reflections on healing, invisibility or visibility, and solidarity. I am Paul Buckley, Vice President and Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer here at Fred Hutch, and we recognize and acknowledge the Coast Salish peoples of this land, the land which touches the shared waters of tribes and bands within the Duwamish, Puyallup, Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. So this will be our second dialogue. Again, queer joy and thriving, reflections on healing, invisibility, visibility, and solidarity. And this dialogue is co-sponsored by FREE, our Fred Hutch Rainbow Employees for Equity. And we are delighted on behalf of the DEI Corps and FREE that you have joined us today. Fred Hutch is taking an authentic, affirming, and active approach to sharing the message that LGBTQIA+, Black, Indigenous, and all people of color, and other marginalized and minoritized people matter to us in our science, in our community, and beyond. The motivation of what we are doing with the Public Art and Community Dialogue program is to deepen our institutional community relationships. The program also provides an opportunity for the selected artists to connect with each other for each of the installments of art connected to the dialogues and relationships we are building, rebuilding, deepening with each of the communities. And these dialogues will inform the final commissioned work and future community initiatives for each of these communities. So at this point, I'm delighted to pass the screen over to Anders McConachie. Anders is a project coordinator for the HIV Vaccine Trials Network, HVTN, and is the current chair of FREE, again, the Fred Hutch Rainbow Employees for Equity. FREE is one of our ERGs, one of our employee resource groups. And he has previously served on the Seattle LGBTQ Commission, helped run a small mutual aid organization focused on serving LGBTQIA+ homeless individuals in the Puget Sound area. That sounds like no small task, no small service, Anders, and is currently involved in the general mutual aid efforts in North Seattle. Last year, Anders also was a member of the inaugural Gender Inclusive and Accessible Spaces project advisory group, work group that the DEI Corps convened. And it was a pleasure to work with him on that project. You may be one of the longer serving co-chairs of FREE as well, Anders. So thank you for your all-around service. And I wanted to take the opportunity to, in this introduction, appreciate you for that work that you are doing, have done, continue to do.
Thank you, Dr. Buckley.
Thank you.
Let's see, so just to give a background of this dialogue, these dialogues provide an opportunity for employees and the broader Seattle community to be in dialogue about community solidarity and our pursuit of equity in research and in healthcare. We're fostering ongoing dialogues with marginalized and oppressed communities to inform our commitment to inclusion and how we represent that commitment in visual form. Today, our dialogue will center around lived experiences, reflections, and aspirations for holistic and sustained health. And these conversations and reflections will inform our commitment to inclusion and how we represent that commitment in visual form. I want to thank our artist selection committee members, Sarah Jo White, Sarah Norman, Antonio Lattimore, Natasha Kimbrough, Rob Bonson, Tracy Drake, and Stefan Wallace for helping us guide this work. LGBTQIA+ people have had long, complex histories in the US healthcare system, from mismanagement of the AIDS epidemic to barriers to accessing care, from pathologizing identities to abusive conversion therapy practices. LGBTQIA+ people have experienced a wide range of problematic and harmful practices in seeking routine and necessary care. However, this is only part of the story. And so join us as LGBTQIA+ community members engage in dialogue around healing, invisibility, visibility, and moving from surviving to thriving. And we encourage that the community that is joining us today to send any questions you may have through the chat for the panelists, and I will try to ask them as we're able. And at this time, I'd like to invite Dr. Buckley to introduce our artist.
Thanks so much, Anders. It is a real pleasure and honor again to introduce Ari Campanella, they or she pronouns. And if you joined the first dialogue, then you were able to experience a little bit of what we experience as a committee in selecting Ari to work with us for this project. But Ari, as you can see on screen, is a queer, non-binary trans woman and mixed media artist based in the Duwamish land currently occupied by the city of Seattle. She draws great inspiration from the inherent complexities of the mundane and the events and materials that shape and color our everyday lives. And they strive to use those observations as a means of keeping alive the hopes, dreams, fears, and passions of people in their community who have been forgotten, abandoned, abused, or otherwise have had their voices taken from them. In the face of constant fear, hate and threats of extermination, Ari shares that her hopes to offer her art, their art, as a message to all in their community to know that you are heard, you are wanted, you are understood, and most importantly, loved. You will find in the chat a link to Ari's work, and we do encourage you to view their wonderful art pieces and projects. Here are some examples or samples of their work. We are so delighted, Ari, again, to be in partnership with you on this project. Welcome, welcome, welcome again. And we want to ask you to briefly share a little bit about what drew you to this program, and having gone through interview experience, been selected, been in communication with us, and had a first dialogue experience recently, how you are thinking about the program presently, perhaps how your thinking has evolved with your involvement to date.
To answer in a chronological order as best as I can remember, I'll admit I was first introduced to the program because one of my coworkers just sent me the Instagram link saying that you were calling for artists, and I said that sounds like me. I'm queer. I'm an artist. That's me. But the interview process was nice. It was nice to be able to chat with you guys and be able to discover more about like what your mission is and how that's sort of executed on a practical and discussionable sort of way. I'll admit it's easy. Sorry, there was a truck passing by. It's easy to be a little cynical with a lot of thoughts and discussions in regards to the queer community and healthcare. However, I've grown to appreciate and acknowledge and recognize that there's a lot of optimism and there's a lot of hope in this community in particular, and what you guys are doing, and especially with the project that I'm lucky enough to be involved with. It's nice to sort of have that, refreshing of optimism and joie de vivre and, reason for creating and having these discussions.
Thanks, Ari. Well, I'm delighted that that your engagement with us thus far is inspiring such optimism. And I want to reflect that I think one of the things that I think about very often, in fact, since my initial conversation with you, with the rest of the committee, I always think that optimism is very much connected to like a sobering understanding of reality. And I think that's what you brought to the discussion, right? There are some things that you said that, I'm not going to quote you because I think that will come up and through this dialogue. But I just really want to appreciate that, that honest sharing that you brought to the interview discussion, which I think, based in that, and based in your determination to live your best life unhindered by anybody else's stuff, that gives us a lot of inspiration and optimism as well. So with that, I want to invite Anders back into discussion on screen, and I will fade to the black.
Thanks, Dr. Buckley. And I think there's a lot to be said for optimism, our community being joyful and living full and exciting lives really is, in a way, the best thing that we're capable of doing, and honestly is one of the most infuriating things to people that would prefer otherwise. So I'm excited to continue this conversation with our three amazing panelists that we have joining us today. Brian Minalga, MSW, is first and foremost a member of the community. Brian is often found in queer spaces on Capitol Hill, where Brian lives and teaches as a dance instructor. At Fred Hutch, Brian is the Deputy Director of the Office of HIV/AIDS Network Coordination, also called HANC. And Brian's work focuses especially on enhancing scientific integrity and the inclusion of underrepresented populations across the spectrum of HIV clinical research. Brian also served in the US Peace Corps and speaks 4 languages. Brian is gender non-binary and uses any pronouns. Thanks, Brian. And then Troy Wageman. Troy uses he, him pronouns and has been with the legacy SCCA and Fred Hutch for the past 13 years. He started in the file room as a temp and has worked his way to administrative manager of nursing and patient care services. Prior to his current career, Troy spent 11 years as a professional musical theater actor, both locally and touring the country, and currently still performs, directs, choreographs, and teaches in the greater Puget Sound area. He is part of the LGBTQIA+ community and has always and will continue to be a passionate advocate for inclusion in all aspects of both disciplines. And Peter Horak uses he, him pronouns and was born and raised in the Czech Republic and immigrated to the US when he was a young adult. Growing up under communism taught him that governments do not always serve the people they represent. He grew up internalizing this, yet held an innate sense that we as individuals needed to speak out for this oppression to change. Peter is a member of the LGBTQIA+ community with a solid connection to supporting people with life-limiting illnesses. Peter began his community with a solid connection to supporting people. Peter began his employment at Fred Hutch in 2010, and his portfolio primarily comprised working in the supportive care services division. Currently, Peter is working part-time while finishing his MSW degree at the University of Washington, and this includes a specialized internship with the Fred Hutch social work team. So welcome, panelists. We often hear the phrase, the LGBTQIA+ community, as if we are one group. But really, we are talking about a truly diverse group of communities of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, and asexual people, among additional genders and sexualities not named in that LGBTQIA+ acronym. Each of these communities have different needs, challenges, strengths, and experiences, yet we do find commonalities when we come together in solidarity. So first question is, what reflections do you have around that statement? What have you experienced as commonalities and or variations among the LGBTQIA+ communities that you are a part of or interact with?
I can go.
Sure.
I think what I've realized upon reflecting upon that statement is that while I am generally lumped into that community, there's these sub-communities that I have found out I really know nothing about, and I have so much to learn. And it truly isn't until recently that I've kind of opened my eyes to all these other individuals that are in my community. Sure, I have a broad sense of existence and knowledge and history and culture of them. But it has been quite fascinating to realize just how much I don't know. And I don't know if other people have had that experience more recently than in the past. And I don't know if that's because it's more visible than it has been in the past. I believe that is to be somewhat true. There's more education out there than there has been in the past that I've definitely been taking advantage of. And yeah, kind of realized how selfish I've been within my own community, because just not for lack of trying, but just for lack of knowledge and the want to learn and support all of these wonderful humans that are within our community.
Absolutely. Brian, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just have a little anecdote about that. I used to do poetry around Seattle. I used to go to the bars and other spots, libraries, and perform in poetry. And in that process, in that field, I was often described as an LGBTQ artist or an LGBTQ poet. And it always struck me because I would think, well, I'm not all of them. I'm not LGBTQ, like it would kind of be difficult to be all of those things at once. But I think, it's this way, this alphabet soup, all these letters we have to try to put all of our community together, which I think there's something nice about that, even though one individual can't be all of these things at once. Maybe we can. I actually have a friend who says that she's at some point in her life identified as each one of those letters in the alphabet. So, we can move in between and across this spectrum of our alphabet soup as well. But I just bring this up because it's kind of like the out of many one, and then, vice versa. We have this great, beautiful, diverse community comprised of so many individual people. And even in just hearing and listening to the bios of the three panelists, today you can tell that, each person has such a unique and interesting story. I mean, I want to know so much more now about all of us here today, just as individuals who belong to this much broader community. So I bring this up just to kind of bring it back to the art piece and note that this is a challenge for you, Ari. I don't envy being able to try to bring all of this together, to represent such diversity in a piece of art, and this, individual yet collective situation that is kind of happening simultaneously.
And I'm curious from the panelists, given that this is such a diverse community, what issues do you think that the LGBTQIA plus community needs to focus on versus not?
I think there's a great amount of unity that could be focused on. I think we all have sort of a shared experience of being othered in some way, in that regardless of, what letter of the alphabet we are, fall under, what letters, there's this sort of lingering, like, oh, you're different from a lot of people. And it bums me out to say that I think there's a lot of othering that even goes on within the community, whether that's, bi erasure, where it's like, oh, bisexual people aren't real. Either you're straight and sometimes swing one way, or, I'm not going to repeat it. It aggravates me. But, whether it's that or like communities of gay and lesbian, or even sometimes bi people who like are advocating for the like suppression and oppression of trans people, all the Twitter and Facebook communities of like, oh, I'm gay, but we should cut off the TIA part, like keep it just LG. It disappoints me to see that much, I don't know, infighting. is really the best way to word it, just because like we're all in this together. We're all being othered, we're all being in some way, shape, or form sort of shoved off to the side of society, at least in American society, or English or Scottish society. But I'd like to see a little bit more unity and a little bit more of a realization that like we're all fighting the same fight. We're all advocating for the same things. Why do we need to separate it further?
Can I build upon that? I think that's part, Ari, thank you for sharing that. I think that's part of like my group, my journey is that I had, like I mentioned before, I'd spent so much time not spending the time using my voice, supporting and learning about all of these other people that are in the community that do need us. And I have seen I've seen the campaigns to just reduce it back down to LGBTQ or whatever. And that too also angers me. And it's again, part of just learning from each other and the unity that has been lacking for such a long time. And there's a lot of joy in our community, but there's also within the community, there's a lot of like shunning, because we, much like many other discussions, we are scared of what we don't know, right? We're scared of, well, that's different than me, but really, we just, yeah, you could not be more right. And I think that is what we need, is more unity and be more together in our fight for each other's rights constantly.
Agreed. And if I can build on some of what was already said, I was always fascinated that on one side, of course, that we all have experienced coming out differently, and all of our stories are different, and yet there is this shared experience that we hold.